The rain fell in sheets over the French Quarter of New Orleans, turning the cobblestone streets into rivers of reflected neon. It was past 2 in the morning, and Vincenzo Moretti stood under the crimson awning of Ristorante Bella Notte, buttoning his Tom Ford suit jacket with the precision of a man who left nothing to chance. Behind him, through the foggy windows, the restaurant still glowed warmly, candles flickering on white tablecloths, the remnants of a business dinner that had just secured him a 7-figure deal with a shipping magnate from Genoa. Vincenzo never celebrated. Success was expected, not surprising. He adjusted his Patek Philippe watch, noted the time, and gestured subtly to his driver, who stood by the black Maserati Quattroporte parked directly in front of the entrance. The street was empty except for shadows, and the occasional gust of wind carrying the scent of magnolia and fried beignets from a nearby cafe that had closed hours ago. Vincenzo Moretti was not a man people approached lightly. At 32, he commanded the Moretti family operations in the Gulf South, with an iron grip wrapped in Italian silk. His slicked back hair never fell out of place, even in humidity that made lesser men wilt. His tailored charcoal suit hugged a physique sculpted by early morning boxing sessions, and a diet monitored with the same ruthlessness he applied to his business dealings. A gold chain lay flat against his collarbone, barely visible beneath his crisp white shirt, and on his right hand, a diamond-encrusted signet ring caught the light with every movement. On his left forearm, partially hidden by his sleeve, the tip of an intricate tattoo, a crowned lion, peeked out, a reminder of the family crest he bore both in ink and in blood. People who worked for him never made eye contact unless invited. People who crossed him rarely made it to trial. He descended the 3 marble steps from the restaurant entrance, his leather Berluti shoes clicking against the wet stone with the rhythm of a metronome. His 2 bodyguards flanked him instantly, hands inside their jackets, eyes scanning the street. The rain intensified, drumming against the awning like impatient fingers. Vincenzo hated rain. It blurred vision, muffled sound, created opportunities for mistakes. He quickened his pace toward the car, where his driver already had the rear door half open, waiting. And then she appeared. From the shadows beside a closed boutique, a figure rose unsteadily. A woman, drenched to the bone, her clothes hanging off her thin frame like rags. Her hair, darkened by rain, clung to her face in tangled strands, and her bare feet left small puddles with each step. She moved directly into Vincenzo's path, her arms wrapped around herself, shaking violently from cold or fear or both. His guards reacted immediately, stepping forward, hands emerging with weapons half drawn. "Don't enter the car," she said, her voice cutting through the rain with unexpected clarity. "It's wired. It'll explode if you start it." Vincenzo stopped. His guards didn't. One grabbed her arm roughly, ready to haul her away, but Vincenzo raised a single finger, a gesture so slight it might have been mistaken for adjusting his cufflink, and both men froze instantly. He looked at her then. Really looked. Most people who approached him on the street wanted money, drugs, or had been sent to deliver a message with a bullet. But her eyes, green, startling against the grime on her face, held something different. Not desperation, not madness, certainty. "Say that again," Vincenzo said quietly, his Italian accent adding weight to each word. "Your car," she repeated, pointing with a trembling hand toward the Maserati. "There are wires. Under the bumper. I saw 2 men working on it about an hour ago. They didn't see me. I was sleeping against the wall there." She gestured toward the boutique entrance where a small alcove provided minimal shelter. "They had tools. They kept looking around, checking if anyone was watching. When they left, I crawled closer and looked. There are wires, thin ones, connected to something metal." The rain continued its assault, but the world seemed to narrow to just the 3 of them, Vincenzo, the woman, and the car 15 feet away that suddenly looked less like transportation and more like a coffin. His driver, sensing the shift in atmosphere, stepped back from the open door instinctively. Vincenzo studied the woman's face for deception, for the telltale signs of a setup, but found none. Her hands shook. Yes, but her gaze never wavered. She wasn't lying. More importantly, she wasn't asking for anything. "Marco," Vincenzo said without turning his head, addressing the shorter of his two guards, a man whose previous career in the Italian Army's bomb disposal unit made him invaluable. "Check it." Marco moved immediately, dropping to one knee beside the Maserati, pulling a small flashlight from his jacket. The beam cut through the darkness beneath the chassis, illuminating the undercarriage. Seconds stretched into minutes. The woman remained where she stood, water streaming down her face, her eyes never leaving Vincenzo's. He noticed details now. The way her clothes, though filthy, had once been quality pieces. A cashmere sweater reduced to threads, jeans that might have cost $200 in another lifetime. She wasn't homeless by birth. She'd fallen there. Marco stood abruptly, his face pale despite his professional training. "Boss, she's right. C4, maybe half a pound, wired to the ignition. Professional work. Military grade. If you'd turned that key." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The street seemed to tilt slightly, though Vincenzo's expression never changed. Someone had tried to kill him. Not with a bullet in a dark alley or poison in his wine, methods he expected and guarded against, but with precision timing and technical expertise. Someone knew his schedule, knew this restaurant, knew he'd be alone in the car with his driver. Someone inside his organization had betrayed him, and this woman, this shivering ghost who'd crawled out of the rain like an omen, had just saved his life. "Get her in the second car," Vincenzo ordered. "Now." His guards hesitated only a fraction of a second before one of them moved to guide the woman toward the black SUV that had been following at a discreet distance. She pulled back initially, fear flashing across her face, the instinctive terror of a wounded animal presented with a cage. "I'm not going to hurt you," Vincenzo said, stepping closer, his voice dropping to something almost gentle, a tone his men had never heard him use. "You just saved my life. Let me repay the favor. What's your name?" She looked at him for a long moment, searching his face for truth. "Rosa," she finally whispered. "My name is Rosa. Rosa." He repeated it, the Italian pronunciation making it sound like a prayer. "Get in the car, Rosa. You're freezing. We'll get you somewhere warm." She allowed herself to be led to the SUV, climbing into the back seat with the awkward movements of someone whose body had forgotten what comfort felt like. Vincenzo slid in beside her, maintaining a respectful distance, while his remaining guard took the front passenger seat. The driver pulled away from the curb smoothly, leaving Marco and the other security team to deal with the bomb and the implications of its existence. Inside the vehicle, the heater blasted warm air that made Rosa shiver even harder, as her body remembered what temperature was supposed to feel like. Vincenzo removed his suit jacket without a word and draped it over her shoulders. She flinched at the gesture, but didn't refuse it. The jacket, still warm from his body and smelling of expensive cologne and tobacco, enveloped her like a shield. "Where do you live?" Vincenzo asked. Rosa laughed, a sound without humor that died quickly. "I don't." "How long?" 3 months, maybe 4. I lose track of days." Vincenzo nodded slowly, processing this information with the same analytical mind that had built his empire. "And you just happened to be sleeping outside my restaurant tonight." "The smell," Rosa said softly, staring at her hands in her lap. Hands that were raw and cracked from exposure. "When they cook, the smell comes out through the vents, garlic, olive oil, basil. It reminded me of before. So I started sleeping there. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to trespass or—" "You saved my life," Vincenzo interrupted. "You could have stayed quiet, watched me die, Probably collected a reward from whoever planted that bomb. But you didn't. Why? Rosa finally looked at him, and in the dim light of the car's interior, Vincenzo saw something that made him pause. Strength buried under layers of trauma and exhaustion. Intelligence dimmed, but not extinguished by months of survival on the streets. Because I know what it's like to be silent when you should speak, she said. I did that for years, stayed quiet when I should have screamed, and it almost killed me. So when I saw those men, when I realized what they were doing, I promised myself I wouldn't be silent again. Not ever. The car glided through the empty streets toward Vincenzo's estate in the Garden District, and he found himself studying this woman who'd emerged from the rain like something out of a Renaissance painting, a fallen angel covered in mud but still somehow luminous. Questions multiplied in his mind. Who was she before? What had she run from? And why? In a city full of homeless people, full of desperate souls who would have ignored a bomb for the promise of $5. Had she been the one to speak? Vincenzo's estate sat behind iron gates and walls covered in climbing jasmine, a 3-story Greek Revival mansion that had belonged to a cotton magnate before the Moretti family acquired it in the 1960s, through means that were never discussed in polite company. The car pulled through the gates at 3:15 in the morning, and Rosa's eyes widened as she took in the columned portico, the manicured gardens still lush despite the late hour, the fountain in the circular driveway where stone dolphins perpetually spouted water into a marble basin. I can't go in there, she said suddenly, shrinking back in her seat. I'm too dirty. I'll ruin everything. You'll ruin nothing, Vincenzo replied, already stepping out of the car and gesturing for her to follow. Come. Inside, the mansion smelled of beeswax polish and old money, all crystal chandeliers and parquet floors that gleamed like mirrors. A housekeeper appeared from somewhere in the depths of the house. Mrs. Chen, a Taiwanese woman in her 60s who'd worked for the Morettis for 20 years, and had seen enough to remain unflappable when her employer arrived before dawn with a bedraggled woman wearing his jacket. Prepare the blue guest room, Vincenzo instructed. Draw a bath. Find clothes. He glanced at Rosa, assessing her size with the same precision he used for everything. Size 4, I think. And food. Something warm but not heavy. Soup, bread, tea. Mrs. Chen nodded once and disappeared up the curved staircase. Vincenzo turned to Rosa, who stood dripping on his marble floor, looking like she might bolt at any second. Go with Mrs. Chen. Clean up. Eat. We'll talk after you've rested. I don't need... Rosa began. Yes, you do, Vincenzo interrupted gently but firmly. And so do I. Someone tried to kill me tonight, Rosa. I need to make phone calls. I need to find out who. But first, I need to know you're taken care of. Because you gave me something invaluable tonight. Time. Time I wouldn't have had if that car had exploded. So please, let me return the favor. Something in his tone, not commanding but genuinely requesting, made Rosa nod. She followed Mrs. Chen up the stairs, casting one last glance back at Vincenzo, who stood in his foyer watching her go, his expression unreadable. 2 hours later, as dawn began to paint the sky in shades of amber and rose, Vincenzo sat in his study surrounded by phones, laptops, and the grim faces of his most trusted men gathered via secure video conference. The bomb had been professional work, military-grade C4 with a mercury switch backup. If the ignition hadn't triggered it, the first sharp turn would have. Marco estimated he'd had maybe 3 seconds before the blast radius would have turned the car into a crematorium. Who knew I'd be there tonight? Vincenzo asked the room, his voice dangerously quiet. The Genoa meeting was scheduled 3 weeks ago. His consigliere, Paolo, replied from the screen. Confirmed twice. Location was shared with the security team, the restaurant, and your personal calendar. So potentially dozens of people, Vincenzo said. But who had the skill to plant a device like that? Who has access to C4 and the expertise to wire it correctly? The Russians, someone suggested. They've been pushing into port operations. The Colombians, another voice offered. They're still angry about the territory dispute in Chalmette. Vincenzo shook his head. This wasn't about territory. This was personal. This was about me specifically. And it was meant to look like an accident. Car bomb, tragic explosion, no clear perpetrator. Whoever did this wanted me dead but the organization intact. Which means... He paused, the realization settling like ice in his chest. It came from inside. The room fell silent. Accusing someone within the family of betrayal was the kind of statement that started wars. But Vincenzo hadn't survived a decade in this business by ignoring patterns. Someone close enough to know his schedule, someone with connections to acquire military explosives, someone who stood to gain from his death but not the family's collapse. The list was short and terrifying. Find out who's been making unusual contacts, Vincenzo ordered. Phone records, bank accounts, travel. Someone talked to someone. Find the conversation. He ended the conference and leaned back in his leather chair, suddenly exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with the late hour. Someone he trusted had betrayed him. Someone he'd probably eaten dinner with, shared wine with, confided in. The thought made his jaw clench so hard his teeth ached. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Mrs. Chen entered with a tray containing coffee and cornetti, still warm from the oven. "The young lady is asleep," she reported. "She ate very little but drank 3 cups of tea. She asked me twice if this was real or if she was dreaming." "What did you tell her?" "I told her it was real, and that Mr. Moretti's hospitality, once extended, is not withdrawn lightly." Mrs. Chen paused, studying him with the frank assessment of someone who'd known him since he was a boy learning the business from his father. "She saved your life." "I know. She asked for nothing in return." "I know that too." "That troubles you," Mrs. Chen observed. It wasn't a question. Vincenzo picked up a cornetto but didn't eat it, just turned it over in his hands. "In my experience, Mrs. Chen, everyone wants something. Money, power, protection, revenge. Everyone has an angle. But her..." He shook his head. "She could have let me die. Hell, whoever planted that bomb probably would have paid her to stay quiet if she'd approached them instead of me. But she didn't. She warned me and asked for nothing. I don't know what to do with that." "Perhaps," Mrs. Chen said quietly, "you could start by accepting that not everyone operates under your rules, Mr. Moretti. Some people do good things simply because they're good people. Rare, perhaps. But not impossible." After she left, Vincenzo sat alone with his coffee growing cold, and that observation circling his mind like a prayer he'd forgotten how to finish. In his world, altruism was a weakness to be exploited. Trust was a liability. Kindness was either a manipulation or a mistake. But Rosa had shattered those assumptions with a few words in the rain, and now Vincenzo found himself in unfamiliar territory, owing a debt to someone who claimed to want nothing. He pulled up the security footage from the restaurant's exterior cameras, rewinding to an hour before he'd emerged. There, 2 figures in dark clothing, working quickly under his car, their movements practiced and efficient. He couldn't see their faces, but their body language spoke of training, of professional expertise. And there, in the corner of the frame, almost invisible in the shadows of the boutique entrance, a small huddle of fabric that must have been Rosa, watching. She'd seen them. She'd had time to walk away, to pretend ignorance, to save herself from any potential complications. Instead, she'd chosen to step into the path of a man whose reputation should have terrified her, to deliver a warning that could have gotten her killed if he'd been less patient, if his guards had been more trigger-happy, if the world had been slightly less aligned in her favor. Courage, Vincenzo thought, or maybe just exhaustion with staying silent. Either way, it had saved his life. At 9 in the morning, Rosa emerged from the guest room wearing clothes Mrs. Chen had procured. Simple jeans, a soft gray sweater, socks that actually fit. Her hair, now clean, fell in damp waves to her shoulders, revealing a face that was striking beneath the remnants of bruises that spoke of violence in her past. She stood uncertainly in the doorway of the dining room, where Vincenzo sat with his second espresso, reading reports on his tablet. "Good morning," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. "Hungry?" Yes, but I should go. You've been too kind already, and I don't want to impose." "Sit, Rosa." Not a command, but not quite a request either. She sat. Mrs. Chen materialized with a plate, eggs, toast, fruit, nothing overwhelming but substantial. Rosa ate slowly, carefully, like someone who'd forgotten the luxury of chewing food properly. Vincenzo watched her without staring, noting the way her hands trembled slightly, the way her eyes kept darting to the exits as if calculating escape routes. "Tell me about before," he said finally. Rosa set down her fork. "Before what?" "Before the streets. You weren't always homeless. Your accent, your manners, even the way you hold a fork. You had another life." "What happened?" For a moment, he thought she might refuse to answer. But then she took a breath, and the words came slowly, like water from a long-sealed well. "I was married. To a man who seemed perfect at first, successful, charming, attentive. By the time I realized what he really was, I was already trapped, isolated from friends, from family. He controlled everything, where I went, what I wore, who I spoke to, and when I didn't obey perfectly." She touched her cheekbone unconsciously, where a faint yellow bruise still lingered. "I tried to leave twice. He found me both times. The second time, he broke 3 of my ribs and told me the next time I ran, he'd kill me and make it look like suicide." Vincenzo's expression didn't change, but his hands tightened around his coffee cup hard enough that his knuckles went white. "So you ran anyway?" "I waited until he left for a business trip. Took nothing but the clothes I was wearing. No phone, no credit cards. He tracked everything. I just walked out and kept walking. Made it to New Orleans because it's big enough to disappear in. I had some money I'd hidden over 2 years, emergency cash. It ran out after 6 weeks. After that..." She shrugged. "The streets. Your husband. He's looking for you." "Always," Rosa said simply. "He's not the kind of man who accepts losing, especially not losing something he considered his property." Vincenzo nodded slowly, processing this information with the tactical mind that had made him feared and respected in equal measure. A woman running from domestic violence, intelligent enough to cover her tracks, but not connected enough to access the resources that would keep her truly safe. She'd traded a prison with walls for a prison without them, and both had nearly killed her. "What did you study?" he asked suddenly. Rosa blinked at the change of subject. "What?" "You strike me as educated. What did you study? Before everything?" "Economics," she answered quietly. "I had 2 semesters left for my master's degree when I met David, my husband. He convinced me to postpone school, said we'd have plenty of time after the wedding. I never went back." "Economics," Vincenzo repeated, something clicking in his mind. "Can you read financial statements? Understand profit margins? Investment portfolios? Risk assessment?" Yes. Why?" He leaned forward, his dark eyes intense. "Because I'm going to make you an offer, Rosa. And I need you to understand that I don't make offers lightly, and I never make them out of charity." Rosa waited, her green eyes wary but curious. "Someone in my organization tried to kill me last night. Someone close enough to know my movements, skilled enough to plant a bomb that would have worked if not for you. I need to find out who. But more than that, I need people around me I can trust absolutely. And trust in my world is rarer than diamonds and more valuable than gold." He paused. You saved my life asking for nothing in return. That makes you either the most foolish person I've ever met or the most trustworthy. I'm betting on the latter. What are you offering? Rosa asked carefully. A job, as my personal assistant. You'll handle schedules, screen correspondence, attend meetings, review financial documents. You'll live here, in this house, where you'll be safe. You'll be paid well. And in return, I need your eyes and ears. I need someone who can look at my organization from the outside and tell me what doesn't add up. Someone smart enough to spot patterns my own people might miss because they're too close to see them. Rosa stared at him. You want me to spy for you. I want you to think for me, Vincenzo corrected. To be my second set of eyes. To question things I take for granted because I've been in this world too long. He leaned back, his expression softening slightly. And yes, I'm also offering you protection from a husband who thinks he owns you. Because in my house, under my roof, with my name behind you, he won't touch you. I guarantee it. The offer hung in the air between them, impossible and tempting in equal measure. Rosa looked around the dining room with its crystal chandelier and fresh flowers, at the man across from her who commanded respect with a glance, and probably had enough blood on his hands to paint the walls red, and thought about the alternative. Back to the streets, back to hiding, back to waiting for David to eventually find her, because men like him always did. Why me? She finally asked. You could hire professionals, people with experience. Because professionals have loyalties that can be bought, Vincenzo answered. Because experts come with agendas. Because every person in my organization wants something from me, has calculated what my favor is worth, sees me as a means to an end. But you saw me as a human being about to die, and you spoke up with no calculation, no angle, no expectation of reward. That kind of integrity, Rosa. In my world, that's more precious than any expertise money can buy. She studied his face for a long moment, searching for deception, for the trap that must surely be hidden in such generosity. But all she found was exhaustion that matched her own, and a kind of desperate sincerity that seemed strange on a man so clearly dangerous. I want to say yes, Rosa admitted. But I need to know. What happens when you find whoever betrayed you? What happens when I'm not useful anymore? Vincenzo smiled slightly, the first real smile she'd seen from him. Then you'll have a reference from the head of the Moretti family, 3 months severance pay, and my personal guarantee of protection from your ex-husband. Plus skills that will make you employable anywhere. I'm not offering indentured servitude, Rosa. I'm offering a job with an exit plan. But I think... He paused, choosing his words carefully. I think you'll find you're useful longer than you expect. Intelligence and integrity don't expire. Rosa took a breath, feeling the weight of the decision settle on her shoulders. Behind her was a husband who'd nearly killed her, streets that had nearly done the same, and a future that stretched out bleak and cold and short. In front of her was a man who dealt in violence but was offering safety, who commanded fear but was asking for trust, who should have terrified her, but somehow didn't. Okay, she said finally. I'll try it, but on one condition. Name it. You never ask me to do anything that compromises my ethics. I won't lie for you. I won't cover up crimes. I won't help hurt innocent people. Business is business, but I have lines I won't cross. Vincenzo laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his face from intimidating to almost boyish. You just demanded ethical boundaries from a Mafia boss. That's either bravery or insanity. Maybe both, Rosa replied, managing a small smile of her own. Fine. Your conditions are accepted. You'll have access to most things, but not everything. Some business I conduct, you'll be better off not knowing about. Can you live with that? As long as you can live with me questioning everything else. Rosa, Vincenzo said, standing and extending his hand across the table. I think this is the beginning of a very interesting partnership. She shook his hand, and for the first time in months, maybe years, Rosa felt something she'd almost forgotten: hope. The first week was an education in contrasts. Rosa learned that Vincenzo Moretti was a man of rigid routines and unexpected kindnesses, someone who demanded perfection in business but showed unusual patience when she stumbled over the complex web of his operations. He woke at 5:30 every morning without an alarm, spent an hour in his private gym where the heavy bag bore the marks of years of precise violence, showered with military efficiency, and was dressed impeccably by 7. Breakfast was always the same: espresso, 1 cornetto, fresh fruit. He read 3 newspapers cover to cover, checked stock markets in 4 countries, and made his first phone calls before 8. Rosa shadowed him through everything, taking notes on her new laptop, a MacBook Pro he'd given her without ceremony, already loaded with encrypted software and access to files that probably would have sent prosecutors into fits of joy if they'd ever seen them. She learned the names of captains and soldiers, shipping schedules and port authorities, restaurants that laundered money, and legitimate businesses that provided cover. She learned which judges were bought, which police captains looked the other way, which politicians owed favors that would never be called in publicly, but always privately. "Doesn't this bother you?" she asked him one afternoon during their 3rd day, reviewing a spreadsheet that detailed protection payments from French Quarter businesses. They sat in his study, afternoon sun slanting through windows overlooking the garden, where a gardener trimmed roses with meditative precision. "Does what bother me?" Vincenzo replied without looking up from the contract he was reviewing. "All of this. The extortion, the violence, the corruption. You're a smart man. You could do anything legitimate and probably excel at it. Why this?" Now he did look up, his dark eyes studying her with an intensity that made her want to squirm. "You want the philosophical answer or the practical one?" "Both." He set down his pen, leaning back in his chair. "Practically, this is the family business. My grandfather started it, my father expanded it, and I inherited it along with the responsibilities and enemies that come with it. I could walk away, theoretically, but that would leave a power vacuum that would get a lot of people killed and destroy everything 3 generations built. Not exactly an honorable exit, and philosophically." "Philosophically?" He smiled without humor. "I don't pretend I'm a good man, Rosa. I know exactly what I am. But I also know that the world isn't divided into saints and sinners as cleanly as people want to believe. The restaurants I extort get security that actually works, protection from gangs that would do much worse, insurance that their businesses won't burn down mysteriously. The drugs I move, they're going to be sold anyway. At least my product is clean and not cut with fentanyl that kills teenagers. The politicians I influence, they'd be corrupt with or without me, but my money keeps them focused on issues that actually matter to this city instead of just lining their own pockets." "That's rationalization," Rosa said quietly. "Yes," Vincenzo agreed. "But it's rationalization built on truth. I'm not saying I'm righteous. I'm saying I'm realistic. And the question isn't whether I'm better than a civilian. I'm not. The question is whether I'm better than whoever would take my place if I left. And the answer to that, Rosa, is definitely yes." She absorbed this, turning it over in her mind. It was the logic of the lesser evil, the pragmatic ethics of someone who decided that because perfection was impossible, intentional imperfection was acceptable. She should have been more disturbed by it. Instead, she found herself understanding it, which disturbed her more. "What about murder?" she asked. "What about it? Have you killed people?" Vincenzo was quiet for a long moment. "Yes. Not many, and never without cause. But yes." "What's cause to you?" "Betrayal, direct threats to family, protection of innocence when law enforcement couldn't or wouldn't act." He met her gaze steadily. "I'm not a serial killer, Rosa. I don't enjoy violence, but I live in a world where violence is sometimes the only language that's understood. When a Colombian crew kidnapped the daughter of one of my restaurant owners and demanded ransom, the police told him to pay. I didn't. I found where they were keeping her, and I made sure they'd never take another child. Was that murder? Legally, yes. Morally. He shrugged. You tell me. Rosa looked away, out the window where the gardener had moved on to pruning the jasmine. I don't know, she admitted. That's the only honest answer, Vincenzo replied. The day you're certain about these things is the day you've stopped thinking clearly. Doubt, Rosa. That's what keeps us human. The moment I'm certain I'm right about everything is the moment I've become the kind of monster I'm trying to avoid being. In that moment, Rosa understood something crucial about Vincenzo Moretti. He was dangerous precisely because he was self-aware. He knew his flaws, acknowledged his sins, and operated within an ethical framework that was twisted, but internally consistent. He wasn't a sociopath. Sociopaths didn't question themselves. He was something more complicated, a man who'd chosen a dark path, but still carried a compass, even if it pointed to a different north than most people's. I'm going to need help with this, Rosa said, gesturing to the spreadsheet. Some of these accounts don't make sense. The numbers are too round, too consistent. It looks like someone's skimming, Vincenzo finished, suddenly alert. Show me. She turned the laptop toward him, pulling up 3 months of data from one of their port operations. See here? Every week, exactly $8,000 in equipment maintenance. But when I cross-reference with the actual maintenance logs, which I found in another file, the costs should be varying. Some weeks high, some low, depending on what needs fixing. But this is constant. Like clockwork. And it's been going on for 6 months. Vincenzo's expression went cold, the temperature in the room seeming to drop 10 degrees. Who handles this account? According to the files, a man named Marco Santini. He's your port supervisor. Marco. Vincenzo said the name like a curse. I've known Marco for 15 years. His father served my father. He stood beside me at my sister's wedding last year. He stopped, jaw clenched. He's stealing from me. Maybe it's a mistake, Rosa offered, though she didn't believe it. Mistakes don't run for 6 months in perfect arithmetic, Vincenzo replied, already reaching for his phone. And even if it was a mistake, it's a betrayal. Because someone stealing from the family doesn't steal money, they steal trust. And trust is the only thing that keeps this organization functioning. He made a call, spoke rapid Italian that Rosa couldn't quite follow, and ended it with a curt nod. Marco will be here tonight. We'll straighten this out. What will you do to him? Rosa asked, suddenly afraid for a man she'd never met. Vincenzo looked at her, and for a moment his expression softened. I'll find out the truth first. If he's guilty, he'll face consequences. But I don't punish without certainty, Rosa. That's one of my rules. Due process, even in our world, matters. That evening, Rosa retreated to her room while Vincenzo conducted his meeting in the study. She didn't want to hear it, didn't want to know what consequences meant in concrete terms. She sat by her window, watching the garden lights come on as twilight fell, and wondered if accepting this job had been the biggest mistake of her life, or the smartest decision. The truth was probably somewhere in between. Around 10, there was a soft knock on her door. Mrs. Chen entered with tea and a concerned expression. The meeting is over. Mr. Moretti asked if you'd join him in the study. Rosa's stomach knotted, but she followed, descending the stairs to find Vincenzo alone, pouring himself a generous measure of whiskey. He looked exhausted, older than his 32 years. Is he dead? Rosa asked bluntly. What? No. Vincenzo looked genuinely shocked. Christ, Rosa, what do you think I am? I don't know, she answered honestly. That's what scares me. He laughed bitterly and gestured for her to sit. Marco confessed. He's been skimming for 8 months, not 6. Almost 200,000 total. His daughter has leukemia. Treatments aren't covered by insurance. He was desperate, tried to cover it with loans, got in deep with some very bad people. Instead of coming to me, he decided to steal. What happens now? He repays what he can, works off the rest. I'm covering his daughter's treatment directly. She'll get the best care money can buy. And he's demoted from port supervisor to inventory management. Lower pay, less responsibility, but he keeps his job and his life. Vincenzo took a long drink. Because you were right earlier. I'm not a monster. I'm just a man trying to maintain order in a chaotic world. Marco made a mistake, but he made it for the right reasons. That deserves mercy. Rosa sat down slowly, her perception of this man shifting again. You're paying for his daughter's treatment. I am. That's not what I expected. I know. Vincenzo met her eyes. But this is what you signed up for. Rosa. Complexity. Contradictions. A world where the same man who would kill to protect his family will also bankrupt himself to save a child he's never met. If you want simple morality, good versus evil, heroes and villains, you're in the wrong house. I'm starting to realize that, Rosa said softly. Over the following weeks, she settled into a rhythm. Mornings were devoted to reviewing financial documents, afternoons to attending meetings where she took meticulous notes, evenings to debriefing with Vincenzo over dinner, a ritual he'd instituted without explanation, but which she'd come to value. He asked her opinion on everything, and to her surprise, he actually listened. When she suggested restructuring the payment schedule for one of their lending operations to reduce defaults, he implemented it immediately. When she pointed out that their legitimate restaurant business could expand with better marketing, he gave her a budget and told her to hire whoever she needed. She was good at this. More than good. She was exceptional. The economics degree that had been gathering dust in her past life suddenly had application, and her mind, sharp but dormant for so long, awakened with a vengeance. She saw patterns in data that Vincenzo's accountants missed, inefficiencies in operations that had been accepted as normal, opportunities in market shifts that no one else noticed. You're wasted as an assistant, Vincenzo told her one night as they reviewed third-quarter projections. You should be running a division. I've been here 6 weeks, Rosa replied, laughing. Your people would mutiny if you promoted me that fast. My people, Vincenzo said carefully, are starting to respect you. They see what I see. You're smarter than most of them. You work harder than all of them. And you don't have the baggage of family politics clouding your judgment. I also don't have the experience of knowing when someone's lying, who to trust, how to handle the violence when it comes. Vincenzo, I'm good at spreadsheets and strategy, but this world you operate in, the actual dangerous parts, I'd be dead in a week on my own. He considered this, swirling wine in his glass. Then we complement each other. I handle the dangerous parts. You handle the thinking parts. Is that what we're doing? Complementing each other? Among other things, he said, and something in his tone made her look up sharply. The air between them had changed recently, shifted from professional courtesy to something more complex. She'd catch him watching her sometimes when he thought she wasn't paying attention, his expression unguarded and oddly vulnerable. And she found herself noticing things about him she shouldn't. The way his jaw tightened when he was angry but trying not to show it. How his accent thickened when he was tired. The surprising gentleness of his hands when he handed her documents, or pulled out her chair at dinner. Among other things, Rosa repeated softly. Vincenzo set down his glass and leaned forward, his dark eyes intense. Rosa, I need to say something, and I need you to hear it without panicking or reading too much into it. Her heart rate kicked up. Okay. I haven't been this comfortable around another person in a decade, maybe ever. You walk into a room and I breathe easier. You question my decisions, and instead of feeling challenged, I feel seen, understood. Like maybe I'm not just the monster everyone assumes I am. He paused. I'm not asking for anything. I'm not pressuring you. I'm certainly not stupid enough to think you'd want anything romantic with a man like me, especially after what you've been through. I just needed you to know that you've become important to me. More important than I probably should allow. Rosa sat very still, processing this confession that should have terrified her, but somehow didn't. You're right that I'm not ready for anything romantic. Maybe I never will be again. David, he broke something in me. Trust, maybe. Or the ability to see men as anything other than potential threats. I understand. But, she continued softly, you're also wrong about something. You're not a monster. You're complicated, morally gray, sometimes frighteningly capable of violence. But you're also loyal, surprisingly kind, and honest in ways that most good men aren't. You don't pretend to be better than you are, but you also don't pretend to be worse. And that honesty? She smiled slightly. That's rarer than you think. So where does that leave us? Vincenzo asked. As partners, Rosa said firmly. As friends, maybe, if that's even possible given the circumstances. And as two people who see each other clearly and choose to stay anyway. That's already more than most people have. More than most people have, Vincenzo agreed, raising his glass. To seeing clearly, then. To seeing clearly, Rosa echoed, touching her glass to his. Outside, night had fully fallen, and somewhere in the city, Vincenzo's enemies were plotting their next move. Somewhere, Rosa's ex-husband was still searching for her, still believing she belonged to him, still representing the past she'd fled. But in this study, in this moment, with wine and honesty, and the strange comfort of being truly understood, both of them felt something they hadn't experienced in years. Safe. 2 months into Rosa's employment, the first real test came not from external enemies, but from within Vincenzo's own family. His cousin, Antonio Moretti, arrived from Sicily unannounced, a bull of a man with his father's bad temper and his mother's worse judgment. He'd been managing European operations for the family, but had apparently decided American opportunities looked more profitable. Rosa was in the study reviewing contracts when Antonio burst in without knocking, followed by 2 of his own guards and an apologetic-looking household staff member who'd clearly tried to stop him. Vincenzo, who'd been on a conference call, ended it abruptly and stood, his body language shifting from relaxed to predatory in an instant. "Tonio," he said coolly, "I didn't know you were coming." "That's because I didn't tell you," Antonio replied in heavily accented English, his eyes sliding past Vincenzo to Rosa with undisguised curiosity and something uglier. "I heard my cousin has a new pet. Wanted to see for myself." Rosa felt the insult like a slap, but kept her expression neutral, continuing to type as if she hadn't heard. She'd learned from watching Vincenzo that the worst thing you could do with bullies was show they'd gotten to you. "Rosa is my personal assistant," Vincenzo said, his tone dropping to something dangerous. "And you'll speak about her respectfully, or leave my house immediately." "Personal assistant," Antonio laughed, the sound unpleasant. "Is that what we're calling them now? Cenzo, you always were too soft, bringing strays into the family business, giving them access to sensitive information. It's weakness. Father would be ashamed." "Our father," Vincenzo corrected, his accent sharpening, "taught me to value loyalty and intelligence over bloodline and tradition. Rosa has both. You, cousin, are testing my patience, which you have significantly less of." Rosa closed her laptop carefully, recognizing the signs of an impending explosion. She stood, ready to excuse herself, but Antonio moved to block her path, looming over her with practiced intimidation. Up close, she could smell alcohol and cologne, see the meanness in his eyes that came from a lifetime of getting away with cruelty because of his last name. "Tell me, Bella," Antonio said, his voice dropping to mock seduction. "What exactly do you do to earn your keep? Because I'm looking for a personal assistant myself, and I'd love to know what services you provide." Before Rosa could respond, Vincenzo moved with startling speed, grabbing Antonio by the throat and slamming him against the wall so hard the framed paintings rattled. Antonio's guards reached for their weapons, but Vincenzo's own security, who'd materialized from seemingly nowhere, had guns trained on them before they could clear leather. "You don't speak to her," Vincenzo said quietly, his voice deadly calm in contrast to the violence of his grip. "You don't look at her. You don't exist in the same room as her without showing respect. Because she saved my life, Antonio. She has earned protection of this family, and anyone who disrespects her disrespects me. Am I making myself clear?" Antonio's face had gone red, his hands clawing uselessly at Vincenzo's wrist. He managed a choked nod, and Vincenzo released him, stepping back with disgust. "Get out of my house," Vincenzo ordered. "Come back when you've learned manners, or don't come back at all. I don't care which." Antonio left with his guards, throwing venomous looks back at Rosa that promised this wasn't over. The study fell silent, except for Vincenzo's harsh breathing as he struggled to regain control. His hands were shaking, not from fear, but from adrenaline, and barely contained rage. "Are you okay?" Rosa asked softly. "I should be asking you that," Vincenzo replied, not turning around. "I'm sorry, my cousin is. He's everything wrong with the old guard. The entitlement, the cruelty, the assumption that might makes right and women are property. I should have warned you he might show up." "You defended me," Rosa said, moving to stand beside him. "You didn't have to do that. He's family. So are you." Vincenzo finally looked at her, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. "Maybe not by blood, but by choice, which counts for more. You're under my protection, Rosa. Anyone who threatens you threatens me. Antonio just learned that lesson. He won't be the last." Rosa felt something shift in her chest, a wall she'd carefully maintained starting to crack. This man, this dangerous, complicated man, had just physically attacked his own cousin for insulting her, had put her safety and dignity above family politics, had called her family. "Thank you," she managed. "Don't thank me for basic human decency," Vincenzo said, but his expression softened. "Though I suppose in my world basic decency is revolutionary. The incident with Antonio had unexpected consequences. Word spread through the organization that Vincenzo had physically confronted family for Rosa's honor, and rather than creating resentment, it earned her a kind of grudging respect. The men who'd been skeptical of her presence stopped making sideways comments. The captains who'd questioned her suggestions started listening more carefully. Even Paolo, Vincenzo's consigliere, who'd been coolly professional at best, began including her in strategic conversations. "You've changed him," Paolo told her one afternoon when Vincenzo was meeting with suppliers. They stood in the garden, where Paolo smoked his ever-present cigar, and Rosa pretended the smell didn't bother her. "I haven't changed anyone," Rosa protested. "He's the same man he always was." "No." Paolo shook his head. "Vincenzo has always been smart, ruthless when necessary, loyal to those who earned it. But he's also been cold, closed off. Since his father died, since he took over fully, he's been like a machine, efficient, but emotionless. You've reminded him he's human. That's not a small thing, Rosa." "What was his father like?" Rosa asked, curious about the man whose shadow still seemed to fall across Vincenzo's decisions. "Marcello Moretti was a great man and a terrible one. Paolo said carefully. He built an empire, commanded absolute loyalty, never showed weakness. He also never showed affection, never praised success, only punished failure, and expected his son to be a perfect soldier from childhood. Vincenzo worshipped him and feared him in equal measure. When Marcello died, heart attack, very sudden, Vincenzo was 27 and suddenly responsible for everything. He spent the last 5 years proving he's worthy of his father's legacy. But he's also spent those years becoming more and more like him. Isolated, untrusting, seeing people as tools rather than humans. Until now, Rosa said softly. Until you, Paolo agreed. You argue with him. You question his decisions. You treat him like a person rather than a position. And instead of being angry, he thrives on it. It's like watching someone remember how to breathe after holding their breath for 5 years. Rosa absorbed this, understanding Vincenzo better now. The rigidity wasn't just about control. It was about survival. He'd learned from his father that showing emotion was weakness. That trust was liability. That leadership meant loneliness. And then she'd stumbled into his life with her questions and her honesty and her refusal to treat him like a king, and somehow that had cracked something open. I'm not trying to change him, Rosa said finally. I'm just being myself, which is probably stupid in this world, but it's all I know how to be. It's exactly what this world needs, Paolo replied, and it's exactly what he needs. Don't stop, Rosa, even when it gets difficult. Especially then. It did get difficult. 3 months in, Rosa discovered evidence of a conspiracy that went higher than anyone had suspected. She'd been reviewing communications between various operations, looking for patterns that might explain the bomb attempt, when she noticed something odd. Several of Vincenzo's captains had been making trips to Atlanta on the same weekends. Not together, but separately, with spacing that seemed deliberately coordinated to avoid attention. Cross-referencing with financial records, she found matching withdrawals from personal accounts, always in cash, always on those weekend trips. She brought it to Vincenzo late one night, after everyone else had gone home. He listened to her presentation, his face growing increasingly grim. Atlanta is Genovese territory, he said finally. If my people are meeting with them without my knowledge. It's a coup, Rosa finished, or preparation for one. Vincenzo stood, paced to the window, his reflection ghostly in the dark glass. How many captains? 4 that I can confirm. Possibly 2 more, but their patterns are less clear. 4. He laughed without humor. 1/3 of my command structure. Not just betrayal, Rosa. Organized betrayal. They've been planning this for months. What will you do? He was quiet for a long time. I need proof before I can act. Accusations without evidence will fracture the organization even if I'm right. Can you get it? Maybe. If I can access their personal communications, their actual meeting locations, their financial connections to the Genovese family. But that would require... She hesitated. Require what? Require me to become a spy. Really become one. Not just analyzing data, but actively gathering intelligence, potentially putting myself at risk. Vincenzo, I'm an economist, not an operative. I don't know how to do this without getting caught. Then I'll teach you, he said, turning to face her. If you're willing. But Rosa, you need to understand. This crosses a line. Right now, your staff, an assistant. If you do this, if you help me root out betrayal at this level, you become something else. You become family and truth, with all the protection and danger that entails. There's no going back from this. Rosa thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. Teach me. Over the next 2 weeks, Vincenzo introduced Rosa to the darker skills of his world. He taught her how to copy data from phones without leaving traces, how to place audio surveillance devices in offices and cars, how to follow people without being noticed, how to lie convincingly under interrogation. She learned to pick locks, to disable security cameras temporarily, to read people's body language for signs of deception. Paolo joined some sessions, teaching her the art of social engineering, how to manipulate people into revealing information they'd never willingly share. "You're a natural," Paolo told her, after she successfully extracted meeting details from one of the suspected captains by pretending she'd overheard a conversation and was just trying to confirm what gift to buy him for his wife. "Most people have tells when they're lying. You don't." "I spent 2 years lying to everyone about being happy in my marriage," Rosa replied flatly. "I got good at hiding truth out of necessity." Vincenzo had overheard. After Paolo left, he approached her carefully. "I'm sorry. That training reminded you of bad things." "Everything reminds me of bad things," Rosa said. "But the difference is, this time I'm learning these skills to protect someone I care about, not to protect myself from someone I'm supposed to love. That makes it bearable." "You care about me," Vincenzo said quietly, like he was testing the words. "Of course I do. I wouldn't be doing this otherwise. Even though you're exactly who you are," Rosa interrupted. "Stop waiting for me to realize you're a monster and run away, Vincenzo. I know what you are. I've known from the beginning, and I'm still here. When are you going to believe that means something?" He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel his warmth, smell his cologne, and the faint scent of whiskey on his breath. "I want to believe it. God, Rosa, you have no idea how much I want to believe it. But everyone who's ever gotten close to me has either betrayed me or died. My father, my mother, my best friend who turned out to be an FBI informant. Everyone. So forgive me if I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop." "Then wait," Rosa said softly, meeting his eyes without flinching. "But while you're waiting, maybe also consider that I'm not everyone. I'm just me, and I'm too stubborn to die, and too loyal to betray." "Those are facts, Vincenzo. You're good with facts. Start believing in this one." For a moment, she thought he might kiss her. He swayed forward slightly, his gaze dropping to her lips, his hand lifting as if to touch her face. But then he stepped back, the moment passing like water through fingers. "We should get back to work," he said, his voice rough. "Those captains won't betray themselves." Rosa nodded, ignoring the complicated swirl of disappointment and relief in her chest. She wasn't ready for romance, might never be ready. But she couldn't deny that something had grown between them, something more than friendship and less defined than love, something that felt like standing at the edge of a cliff with the wind pushing you forward and your common sense screaming to step back. They worked through the night, planning their strategy. Rosa would attend an upcoming meeting in Atlanta, posing as Vincenzo's representative to discuss new distribution channels. In reality, she'd be there to gather evidence of the conspiracy, to record conversations, to confirm identities of the Genovese family members involved. It was dangerous, possibly suicidal if she was caught. But it was also necessary. "You don't have to do this," Vincenzo told her as dawn broke over the garden. "I could send professionals." "Your professionals are the ones betraying you," Rosa pointed out. "Who are you going to trust? No, it has to be me. I'm the only person in your organization who hasn't been compromised. Well, me and Mrs. Chen." "Mrs. Chen is 70, Vincenzo said, smiling despite himself. "Though honestly, she'd probably be more effective than half my people." "Age brings wisdom," Rosa replied, "and a complete lack of patience for bullshit." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun painted the sky in shades of rose and gold. In a few hours, Rosa would begin the most dangerous assignment of her new life. But for now, in this moment, with coffee growing cold and Vincenzo's solid presence beside her, She felt oddly peaceful. Whatever came next, at least she wouldn't face it alone. The Atlanta meeting was scheduled in a legitimate restaurant, a high-end steakhouse with private rooms where mob business disguised itself as corporate dinner. Rosa wore a wire so thin it felt like spider silk against her skin, hidden beneath a conservative business suit that Vincenzo had insisted she wear. "Look professional," he'd told her. "You're there representing Moretti interests. Act like you belong at the table, and they'll treat you like you do." Then, the flight to Atlanta felt like it took seconds and hours simultaneously. Vincenzo had wanted to come with her, had argued they should present a united front, but Rosa had convinced him that his presence would make the conspirators cautious. She needed them comfortable, arrogant, willing to speak freely. That only happened if they thought they were dealing with a mere assistant, someone beneath their notice. The restaurant was everything she'd expected. Dark wood, leather booths, waiters who moved like trained assassins, and probably were. Rosa was led to a private room in the back, where 4 men sat around a table already cluttered with drinks and appetizers. She recognized 3 from photos Vincenzo had shown her: Captain Marco Russo, Captain Anthony DiNardo, and Captain Joseph Joey Knuckles Castellano. The 4th man she didn't know, but his expensive suit and the deference the others showed suggested he was high-ranking in the Genovese family. "Gentlemen," Rosa said, channeling every ounce of confidence she'd learned from watching Vincenzo negotiate. "Thank you for meeting with me. Mr. Moretti sends his regards and asked me to discuss the new distribution arrangements for the Northeastern Corridor." "Moretti sent his secretary?" Marco said with barely concealed disdain. "Where's Vincenzo himself? Too important to handle his own business now." "Mr. Moretti handles priorities personally," Rosa replied smoothly, taking a seat without being invited, a power move Vincenzo had taught her. "He deemed me sufficient for this discussion. Unless you feel the matter isn't worth your time?" She let the challenge hang in the air, watching them react. The unknown man leaned forward, studying her with sharp eyes. "I'm Thomas Genovese, and you're Rosa. What was it?" "Just Rosa," she said, deliberately vague. "Mr. Moretti values discretion. I'm sure you understand." Thomas smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Of course. Well, just Rosa. Your boss has been a problem for certain parties. He's young, aggressive, doesn't respect traditional boundaries. Some feel he needs to learn his place. And some feel," Rosa said carefully, her heart hammering but her voice steady, "that traditional boundaries are outdated concepts maintained by people afraid of innovation. Mr. Moretti respects strength and intelligence. He has little patience for weakness disguised as tradition." "Is that a threat?" Joey Knuckles growled. "It's an observation," Rosa replied. "But since we're being candid, yes, it's also a warning. Mr. Moretti knows some of his people have been making unauthorized trips to Atlanta. He knows about meetings that weren't disclosed. He knows about financial irregularities." She let that sink in, watching their expressions shift from arrogance to concern. "What he doesn't know yet is who's loyal and who's already committed treason. I'm here to find out." The room fell silent. Marco's hand moved toward his jacket, but Thomas stopped him with a gesture. "You're wearing a wire," Thomas said flatly. "Obviously," Rosa replied, her pulse racing, but her face calm. "Did you think I'd come here unprotected? Every word spoken in this room is being recorded and transmitted. If I don't walk out of here in 30 minutes, that recording goes to law enforcement with enough evidence to charge everyone at this table with conspiracy to commit murder, racketeering, and about 15 other felonies. So let's all stay calm and have a productive conversation, shall we?" It was a massive bluff. The wire transmitted but didn't record remotely, and she had no backup outside the restaurant. But they didn't know that, and the uncertainty made them hesitate just long enough for her to press her advantage. "Here's what's going to happen," Rosa continued, channeling Vincenzo's cold authority. "You're going to tell me exactly what you've planned, who's involved, what the timeline is, what you expect to gain. In exchange, I'll speak to Mr. Moretti about leniency. He's a reasonable man when given reason to be reasonable." "And if we refuse?" Anthony asked. "Then we do this the hard way, and nobody wins. Vincenzo survives because he's been prepared for betrayal since the day he took power. You all end up dead or in prison. The Genovese family loses valuable alliances and faces retaliation. Is that really preferable to negotiation?" Thomas studied her for a long moment, then surprised her by laughing. "You've got balls, Rosa. I'll give you that. Walking in here, admitting you're wired, threatening us in our own territory, that's either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid." "Can't it be both?" Rosa replied, managing a slight smile. That broke the tension. Thomas leaned back, making a decision. "Fine. We talk. But understand, girl, what we're discussing here, it's already in motion. Too many pieces moving to stop now. Best you and Vincenzo can do is survive it." Over the next 20 minutes, Rosa listened to them detail a plan months in the making. The bomb had been first attempt, meant to look like an accident, letting Antonio take over while appearing grief-stricken and dutiful. When that failed, they'd moved to Plan B, a coordinated strike during the annual family meeting next month, where all of Vincenzo's loyalists would be in one place. Hit them all at once, create chaos, let the Genovese family step in as mediators who would conveniently end up controlling Gulf South operations. "Why betray him?" Rosa asked. "Vincenzo's made everyone rich, kept the peace with other families, modernized operations. What more do you want?" "Respect," Marco spat. "We've been in this life since before he was born, taking orders from a kid who thinks he's smarter than everyone. His father knew how to lead, with fear, with strength. Vincenzo leads with spreadsheets and strategy meetings. It's weak." "It's evolution," Rosa corrected. "The world changed. Vincenzo changed with it. Your dinosaur's angry that mammals are taking over, and you know how that story ends." By the time she left the restaurant, her legs were shaking so badly she could barely walk to the waiting car. But she'd gotten everything. Names, dates, locations, enough to dismantle the conspiracy completely. The wire had recorded every word, every confession, every detail they'd been arrogant enough to share. The driver took her straight to the airport where Vincenzo's private plane waited. She collapsed into the leather seat, adrenaline finally crashing, leaving her exhausted and slightly nauseous. Her phone rang. Vincenzo, who'd been listening to the transmission in real time. "Are you okay?" His voice was tight with controlled panic. "I'm fine. I got it all. Everything you need. You could have been killed. When you told them about the wire, when you bluffed about backup." "Jesus Christ, Rosa. I nearly had a heart attack." "But it worked. It worked because you're either brilliant or insane, and I haven't decided which." He paused. "I'm proud of you, and terrified, but mostly proud." "Save the pride for after we survive this," Rosa said, closing her eyes. "They're planning a massacre, Vincenzo. At the family meeting. Everyone you trust, everyone loyal to you, they want to kill them all at once." "Then we'll be ready," Vincenzo said, his voice hardening into something deadly. "They think I'm weak because I use strategy instead of muscle? Time to show them strategy backed by muscle is unstoppable. Get home safely, Rosa. We have work to do." The next 3 weeks were a carefully orchestrated performance. Vincenzo acted as if nothing was wrong, proceeding with preparations for the annual family meeting while secretly planning a counterstrike. He fed false information to the conspirators through channels he knew were compromised, letting them think their plan remained secret. Meanwhile, he brought in loyalists from other cities, positioned law enforcement allies to be strategically absent when needed, and prepared contingencies for every possible scenario. Rosa worked alongside him through 18-hour days, barely sleeping, living on espresso and nervous energy. They mapped out every detail of what would happen, who would be where, how to contain violence while still making a definitive statement that betrayal would not be tolerated. "Are you going to kill them?" Rosa asked one night, too tired to dance around the question. "The conspirators?" "Yes," Vincenzo said without hesitation. "Not all at once, not in public. But yes, they plan to murder dozens of people, Rosa. There's no coming back from that." "And the Genovese family?" "Thomas Genovese will receive a message, a clear one. After tonight, they'll understand that Gulf South operations remain Moretti territory, and any future attempts to interfere will result in war they can't win." "You sound certain." "I am certain," Vincenzo replied. "Because I have something they don't. I have you. Your intelligence, your courage, your ability to see patterns they missed. You've given me an advantage, Rosa, one I intend to use completely." The night of the family meeting, Rosa dressed in black, practical, elegant, easy to move in. Vincenzo gave her a gun, a small 9mm that fit in her purse. "Just in case," he said. "Do you remember how to use it?" "Point and shoot," Rosa replied, trying to sound confident, despite never having fired a weapon outside the range where he'd trained her. "Though I really hope it doesn't come to that." "So do I," Vincenzo said. Then, unexpected, he pulled her into a brief, fierce hug. "Whatever happens tonight, thank you. For trusting me, for helping me, for being exactly who you are." "We're family," Rosa said into his shoulder, breathing in his cologne and the scent that was uniquely him. Family protects each other. The meeting was held in a warehouse Vincenzo owned near the port, neutral ground theoretically, though of course nothing about tonight would be neutral. Rosa stayed close to Vincenzo as families arrived, watching the conspirators file in with false smiles and real weapons hidden under expensive suits. She noted their positions, their body language, the way they clustered together slightly separate from Vincenzo's loyalists. The division was subtle but clear if you knew to look for it. At precisely 8 o'clock, Vincenzo called the meeting to order. He stood at the head of a long table, with Rosa seated to his right, a position of honor that didn't go unnoticed. Paolo sat to his left, and around the table, 20 men who represented the Moretti family's command structure. "Thank you all for coming," Vincenzo began. "We have much to discuss: expansion opportunities, territorial agreements, financial projections for next year. But first, I'd like to address a more pressing matter." He nodded to Paolo, who pressed a button on a remote. A screen descended from the ceiling, and suddenly the restaurant in Atlanta filled the space. Rosa's recording of the conspirators detailing their plot. The sound was crystal clear, every word of betrayal preserved in digital permanence. The room erupted into chaos. The conspirators reached for weapons, but they were already surrounded. Vincenzo's loyalists had positioned themselves strategically, and now guns were drawn in a Mexican standoff that could turn bloody in seconds. "Gentlemen," Vincenzo said, his voice cutting through the panic like a blade. "Lower your weapons, all of you, now." Slowly, reluctantly, guns were lowered. The conspirators looked trapped, desperate, calculating odds that had already turned decisively against them. Marco, Anthony, Joey, and the others who participated in this betrayal, Vincenzo continued, his voice colder than Rosa had ever heard it. "You plan to murder me. Fine. I'm a threat. I understand that logic. But you also plan to murder my loyalists, men who have served this family faithfully for decades, men with families, with children, with legacies that deserved better than a massacre." "Vincenzo," Marco began. "Shut up," Vincenzo snapped. "You don't get to speak. You don't get to explain. You planned this for months, Marco. You who I've known since childhood. You whose father stood beside my father. You chose to ally with the Genovese family, to sell out your own people for what? A promise of more territory? More money? You already had everything, and it still wasn't enough. He walked around the table slowly, stopping behind each conspirator. You thought I was weak because I used strategy instead of just violence, because I value intelligence and planning over brute force. You mistook evolution for weakness. Let me correct that misunderstanding. What happened next occurred so quickly Rosa almost missed it. At Vincenzo's signal, his loyalists moved simultaneously, grabbing the conspirators before they could react. Weapons were stripped, hands were bound, and in less than 30 seconds, the traitors were subdued completely. Here's what's going to happen, Vincenzo said, his voice calm again. The calm of absolute control. You'll be held until I decide appropriate consequences. Your families will be protected, but not compensated. They'll learn the truth of what you did, and they'll understand why. Your positions will be filled by men who understand loyalty isn't conditional. And Thomas Genovese will receive a message that any future attempts to interfere with Moretti operations will result in consequences he won't survive. He looked around at the remaining men. His loyalists, the ones who'd stood firm. As for the rest of you, understand this. The woman to my right, Rosa, uncovered this conspiracy. She risked her life in Atlanta to gather this evidence. She demonstrated more courage and loyalty than men who've been in this family for decades. From tonight forward, she holds the rank of consigliere, second only to me in authority. Anyone who questions her, anyone who disrespects her, answers to me personally. Are we clear? Stunned silence, then slowly, nods of acknowledgement. Rosa felt her face flush, the weight of what Vincenzo had just done settling on her shoulders. He'd promoted her to the second highest position in his organization, in front of everyone, making it official and irrevocable. Later, after the conspirators had been removed, and the loyalists had dispersed with new orders and new understanding, Rosa found Vincenzo alone in his office at the warehouse, staring out a dirty window at the port lights reflecting on dark water. You didn't have to do that, she said quietly. The promotion, that's going to cause problems. Maybe, Vincenzo agreed, but it's also the truth. You've earned it, Rosa, not through years of service or family connections, but through actual merit. You're smarter than Paolo, braver than most of my soldiers, and more loyal than men who've been with me since the beginning. Why shouldn't you be consigliere? Because I've been here 3 months, Rosa pointed out. Because I'm a woman in a very male world. Because I'm not Italian, wasn't born into this life. Don't have the connections or history that position usually requires. All irrelevant, Vincenzo said, turning to face her. What matters is trust, intelligence, and courage. You have all 3 in abundance. The old rules, the traditional requirements, they're what led to betrayal. Marco had decades of service. Anthony had family connections. Joey Knuckles had the respect of the streets. And all of them were willing to sell me out for a better offer. You, with your 3 months and your economics degree and your complete lack of mob pedigree, stayed loyal when my own blood wouldn't. That means something, Rosa. That means everything. Rosa moved to stand beside him at the window. What will you do with them? The conspirators? Marco and Anthony will be given a choice. Leave the country and never return, or face consequences they won't survive. Joey Knuckles and the others will be demoted, stripped of authority but allowed to live if they swear renewed loyalty. Thomas Genovese will receive the recording along with a message that the next Genovese family member who interferes with Moretti operations will be returned in pieces. That's surprisingly merciful, Rosa observed. I learned from you, Vincenzo said softly. You've shown me there's strength in mercy, that violence should be the last resort, not the first response. Marco's daughter still has leukemia. Killing him doesn't help her. Exiling him at least gives his family a chance at a life somewhere else. Is it soft? Maybe. But maybe soft isn't the same as weak. Rosa felt her throat tighten with emotion she couldn't quite name. This man, who'd been raised to rule with an iron fist, was learning to open that fist slightly, to let mercy in alongside justice. And he credited her with teaching him that lesson. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we rebuild," Vincenzo replied. "We fill the gaps left by betrayal with people we can trust. We strengthen our operations. We move forward. And you and I, Rosa, we continue doing what we've been doing, being partners, being family, being whatever this is that we're becoming." He turned to face her fully, and in the dim light of the office, Rosa saw vulnerability in his expression that he usually kept carefully hidden. "I meant what I said earlier. You've become essential to me. Not just professionally, though that's certainly true, but personally. You make me want to be better than I am. You make me believe that maybe I'm not just the monster everyone thinks I am. That's a gift, Rosa, one I never expected to receive." "You're not a monster," Rosa said firmly. "You're a man trying to do right in a world that often doesn't reward righteousness. You're complex and sometimes frightening and definitely dangerous, but you're also loyal, protective, surprisingly kind, and more honest than most good men I've known." "I meant what I said earlier, too. We're family. And family means seeing each other clearly, and choosing to stay anyway." For a long moment, they stood there in comfortable silence, two people who'd found unexpected connection in circumstances that should have made any relationship impossible. Outside, the port continued its eternal work, ships arriving and departing, cargo being loaded and unloaded, the machinery of commerce grinding on, regardless of the human dramas playing out in its shadow. "Thank you," Vincenzo finally said, "for everything, for saving my life that first night, for staying when you could have left, for being brave in Atlanta, for standing beside me tonight. Just, thank you." "You're welcome," Rosa replied. "Though I should probably thank you too. You gave me safety when I had none, purpose when I'd lost all hope, and a place to belong when I thought I'd never have one again. That's not a small gift either." As they left the warehouse together, walking toward the car with Vincenzo's hand resting lightly on her back in an unconsciously protective gesture, Rosa realized something profound. She was happy. For the first time in years, possibly in her entire adult life, she was genuinely, deeply happy. Not because her circumstances were perfect. They were complicated, dangerous, morally ambiguous at best. But because she was living authentically, using her intelligence fully, and surrounded by people who valued her for who she actually was, rather than who they wanted her to be. It wasn't the life she'd imagined when she studied economics, dreaming of corporate success and suburban contentment. It was stranger, darker, more complex than any plan she'd made. But it was hers, chosen freely, and that made all the difference. 6 months passed, and the Moretti organization stabilized under its new structure. Rosa proved to be an exceptionally effective consigliere, bringing business acumen and strategic thinking that complemented Vincenzo's instinctive leadership. Together, they modernized operations, reduced violence while maintaining authority, and even managed to negotiate peace agreements with rival families that had been feuding for decades. The organization became more profitable, more efficient, and paradoxically more legitimate, diversifying into legal businesses that eventually would provide cover and eventual exit strategies. But the past, as it always does, came calling. It happened on a Tuesday morning, unremarkable in every way except what it brought. Rosa was in Vincenzo's study reviewing quarterly reports when Mrs. Chen knocked softly. "Miss Rosa, there's a man at the gate asking for you. He says he's your husband." Rosa's coffee cup slipped from her fingers, shattering on the hardwood floor. David. After all this time, he'd found her. Vincenzo was on his feet instantly, his hand moving to the phone. "I'll have him removed, arrested, whatever you want." "No," Rosa said, her voice surprisingly steady despite the terror flooding her system. "I need to face him. If I don't, he'll never stop looking. He'll always be this shadow hanging over me. I need to end this. Then I'm coming with you, Vincenzo said flatly. No, this is my fight, Vincenzo. Mine to finish. Rosa, please. She looked at him, willing him to understand. I ran from him once. I've been hiding ever since. If I face him with you standing behind me, it doesn't count. I need to do this myself. To prove to myself I can. To prove I'm not that frightened woman anymore. Vincenzo studied her face, then slowly nodded. 5 minutes. You have 5 minutes, and then I'm coming out there whether you want me to or not. And I'm watching from the security feed the entire time. Deal, Rosa said. She walked out to the gate with her heart hammering but her head high. David stood on the other side of the iron bars, and the sight of him was like a punch to the stomach. Same perfect hair, same expensive suit, same smile that had once charmed her and later terrified her. He looked exactly as she remembered, which somehow made him more monstrous. Rosa, he said, his voice warm and friendly as if they were old lovers meeting by chance. I've been so worried about you. Are you okay? Don't, Rosa said sharply. Don't pretend this is a concerned husband looking for his lost wife. We both know what you are, David. His smile faltered, replaced by something colder. I'm your husband. You belong with me. This little rebellion has gone on long enough. Come home. I am home, Rosa replied. I found a new life, one where I'm respected, valued, safe. Things I never had with you. Safe? David laughed, gesturing at the mansion behind her. You're living with a mobster, Rosa. I know who Vincenzo Moretti is, what he does. You think that's safety? You've traded one prison for another. The difference, Rosa said coldly, is that Vincenzo has never hit me, never controlled me, never made me feel like I'm worthless. He values my intelligence, trusts my judgment, treats me like an equal. You did none of those things. You were my warden, David. Vincenzo is my partner. If you can't see the difference, that says everything about you and nothing about me. David's expression darkened, the mask slipping to reveal the rage beneath. You're coming home. Today. Right now. I don't care what delusions you've built up about this life. You're my wife, Rosa. Mine. And I'm not leaving without you. Yes, you are, Rosa said quietly. Because if you don't, I'll have you arrested for assault, for domestic violence, for stalking. I've documented everything, David. Every bruise, every threat, every moment of terror. I have evidence, witnesses, a paper trail that will destroy your reputation and put you in prison. The only reason you're not already behind bars is because I chose mercy. Don't make me regret that choice. You're bluffing, David said, but uncertainty crept into his voice. Try me, Rosa challenged. Stay here 1 more minute. Make 1 more threat. Give me a reason to make that call. I'm not the woman you married, David. That woman died the night you broke her ribs and told her she deserved it. The woman standing here now, she's stronger than you ever allowed her to be, and she's done being afraid of you. For a long moment, they stared at each other through the iron bars. The man who'd nearly destroyed her, and the woman who'd rebuilt herself from rubble. David seemed to see something in her eyes that convinced him she was serious, because his bravado crumbled slightly. This isn't over, he said, trying to save face. I'll contest the abandonment. I'll fight the divorce. I'll make your life hell. Do your worst, Rosa replied. I've survived actual hell, David. Whatever legal battle you want to wage, it's nothing compared to what I've already endured. And unlike you, I have resources now. Lawyers who make yours look like law school dropouts. Money that makes your trust fund look like pocket change. And most importantly, I have people who actually care about my well-being fighting beside me. You have nothing but ego and rage. It's not a fair fight. She turned to walk away, dismissing him with the gesture. "Rosa!" David called after her. "You can't do this. You can't just throw away our marriage." She stopped, looked back one last time. "I'm not throwing it away, David. You destroyed it years ago, with your fists and your cruelty, and your need to control everything. I'm just acknowledging what's been dead for a long time. Goodbye. Don't contact me again." She walked back to the house without looking back, her legs shaking but her spine straight. Behind her, she heard David shouting threats, making promises, doing everything except accepting the truth she'd just delivered. The security guards Vincenzo had positioned discreetly nearby moved to escort David from the property, making it clear he wasn't welcome. Inside, Vincenzo waited by the door, his expression tight with controlled concern. "Are you okay?" "I am," Rosa said, and realized she meant it. The terror she'd expected to feel in David's presence had been there. Yes, but muted, manageable. Because she wasn't alone anymore. Because she'd built a new life, found new strength, become someone David couldn't touch even when standing 3 feet away. "I'm really okay." "He threatened you," Vincenzo said, having heard every word through the security feed. "He made it clear he's not going to accept this peacefully." "Let him try," Rosa said. "File the divorce papers. Get the best lawyer money can buy. I'm done running, Vincenzo. I'm done being afraid. Whatever David wants to throw at me, I can handle it. We can handle it." Vincenzo pulled her into an embrace, and Rosa let herself lean into his solid warmth, drawing strength from his presence. "We'll handle it," he agreed. "Together. That's what family does." The divorce proceedings were ugly, exactly as expected. David fought everything, tried to claim abandonment, attempted to freeze her access to the money she'd earned working for Vincenzo. But Rosa's lawyers, the best mob money could retain, demolished every argument. They presented evidence of abuse, testimony from doctors who'd treated her injuries, psychological evaluations that detailed the trauma David had inflicted. They demonstrated that she'd left not out of malice but out of necessity, that her absence wasn't abandonment, but escape. Through it all, Vincenzo stood beside her, attending every hearing where his presence was appropriate, ensuring she had support even when the system seemed designed to re-victimize her. His reputation helped. Lawyers and judges who might have been sympathetic to David's position suddenly found themselves remarkably cooperative when they understood that opposing Rosa meant opposing the Moretti family. 8 months after filing, the divorce was finalized. Rosa was legally free, with a settlement that included everything she'd brought into the marriage plus compensation for pain and suffering. David was left with his reputation damaged, his social standing compromised, and a restraining order that made it clear any further contact would result in immediate arrest. "It's over," Rosa said, holding the signed decree in hands that didn't shake. "It's actually over." "How do you feel?" Vincenzo asked. They stood in his study where so much of their partnership had been forged, afternoon sun painting the room in amber. "Free," Rosa answered. "Lighter. Like I've been carrying a weight I didn't even realize was there, until suddenly it wasn't. David doesn't own me anymore. Legally, emotionally, psychologically. He has no claim, no power, no control. I'm just me. Rosa, whoever that is without him defining it. I can tell you who that is," Vincenzo said softly. "She's the bravest woman I've ever met. She's brilliant, loyal, compassionate despite having every reason to be bitter. She saved my life, rebuilt my organization, and somehow managed to make me believe in things I'd stopped believing in years ago." "What things?" Rosa asked. "Trust. Partnership. The possibility that maybe I'm not destined to end up like my father. Powerful but alone. Respected but never truly known. You've given me something I didn't know I needed, Rosa. You've given me hope." Rosa felt her heart skip, suddenly aware of how close they were standing, how his dark eyes held something more than professional respect or even friendship. Vincenzo. I know, he said quickly. I know you're not ready. Maybe you'll never be ready for something more than what we have. And that's okay. I'm not saying this to pressure you or because I expect anything. I just need you to know that when you are ready, if you ever are, I'll be here, waiting, hoping, but never pushing. For a long moment, Rosa looked at this man who'd become the center of her world in ways she hadn't planned or expected. This dangerous, complicated man who'd shown her more respect in months than David had in years, who'd protected her, valued her, seen her truly and chosen to stay, who'd learned mercy from her and taught her strength in return. She thought about the woman who'd warned him about a car bomb in the rain, desperate and homeless, but still brave enough to speak. She thought about everything that had happened since, the risks, the victories, the gradual building of trust and partnership. She thought about the future stretching ahead, uncertain, but no longer frightening. And she made a choice. Rosa stepped forward, closing the distance between them, and kissed Vincenzo Moretti for the first time. It was gentle, tentative, testing. His response was equally careful, his hands coming up to cup her face with a tenderness that seemed impossible from someone so accustomed to violence. When they finally broke apart, both breathing slightly harder, Vincenzo searched her face with wonder. Are you sure? I'm terrified, Rosa admitted. Trusting again, opening myself to that vulnerability. It scares me more than anything I've faced since leaving David. But I'm also certain that if I'm ever going to try again, it should be with you. Because you've proven yourself in ways that matter. Not with grand gestures or pretty words, but with consistent actions over time. With patience, with respect, with genuine care for my well-being even when it complicated your life. That's worth being brave for. I won't rush you, Vincenzo promised. We go at whatever pace you need. If that's slow, fine. If you need to stop and step back, we stop. You're in control here, Rosa. Always. Thank you, Rosa whispered. For understanding, for waiting, for being exactly who you are. They stood together in the fading light. Two people who'd found each other in the worst circumstances and somehow built something worth protecting. Outside, Vincenzo's organization continued its work. Somewhere in the city, dangers lurked. Rivals, law enforcement, the perpetual threats that came with this life. But in this moment, in this room, there was only peace and possibility. 3 months later, during the autumn where New Orleans painted itself in shades of burgundy and gold, a new threat emerged, but not from outside the organization. One of the captains Vincenzo had promoted after the purge, a man named Salvatore, had been secretly working with the FBI. He'd been gathering evidence, recording conversations, documenting operations with the thoroughness of someone promised immunity and witness protection. Rosa discovered it by accident, noticing patterns in communication logs that suggested Salvatore was contacting the same encrypted number repeatedly. Following the trail led to surveillance, which confirmed their worst fears. Salvatore was an informant, and he'd gathered enough evidence to potentially bring down the entire Moretti operation. We have to move fast, Rosa told Vincenzo, as they reviewed the evidence in his study. It was past midnight, and they'd been working through dinner, too focused to eat. If he delivers what he has to his handlers, we're done. Mass arrests, RICO charges, everything. The organization doesn't survive it. Can we flip him? Vincenzo asked, already knowing the answer but grasping for options. No. He's in too deep with the FBI. They've probably promised him a new life, complete immunity. Nothing we offer competes with that. Then we stop him before he can deliver the evidence, Vincenzo said grimly. How? If he disappears, the FBI will know we were onto him. That accelerates their timeline, maybe gets them to move on what evidence they already have. Rosa stared at the documents spread across the desk, her mind racing through scenarios and outcomes. Then something clicked, a solution so elegant it almost seemed too simple. We don't stop him. We control what he delivers. What do you mean? Salvatore thinks his cover is intact. He doesn't know we're onto him. So we feed him information. Carefully curated information that leads the FBI in the wrong directions. We let him gather evidence on operations that don't matter, on businesses we're planning to divest from anyway. We make sure what he delivers is technically accurate but ultimately useless. And meanwhile, we restructure everything real, everything important, in ways his evidence doesn't touch. Vincenzo stared at her, then slowly smiled. You want to turn our own informant into a weapon against the investigation? Exactly. It's risky. We have to be absolutely perfect in what we feed him, careful that nothing we let him discover actually harms us. But if we pull it off, the FBI wastes months chasing leads that go nowhere, while we clean up anything actually vulnerable. How long do we have? Based on his communication patterns, maybe 2 months before he's scheduled to deliver his full report. We use that time to give him exactly what we want him to find. The operation was delicate, requiring precision Rosa hadn't known she possessed. Every document Salvatore accessed had to be vetted, every conversation he overheard carefully scripted. They fed him evidence of operations that technically existed, but had minimal value, led him to believe key meetings were happening in locations they'd already planned to abandon, made him think he was documenting massive criminal enterprise when he was actually documenting something closer to aggressive but legal business practices. Through it all, the real organization restructured in shadows. Legitimate businesses were fortified. Questionable operations were either legitimized or quietly shuttered. Financial structures were reorganized through lawyers who specialized in exactly these transformations. By the time Salvatore delivered his evidence, the Moretti family would be on paper dramatically less criminal than the FBI expected. You're orchestrating the organization's evolution, Paolo observed one evening, watching Rosa work through legal restructuring documents, moving it toward legitimacy. Someone has to, Rosa replied. This life, this world, it can't last forever. Law enforcement gets smarter, technology makes secrets harder to keep, society changes in ways that make old criminal models unsustainable. Either the family evolves or it dies. I prefer evolution. Vincenzo's father would have hated this, Paolo said, but he was smiling. Marcello believed in the old ways, the traditional power structures. He'd see what you're doing as betrayal of everything he built. Good thing he's not here then, Rosa replied. Vincenzo is not his father. He's better, smarter, more adaptable, willing to change when change is necessary. That's not weakness, Paolo. That's wisdom. When Salvatore finally delivered his evidence to the FBI, Rosa and Vincenzo watched the fallout from a safe distance. Federal agents raided properties, but found legitimate businesses operating legally. They arrested several low-level operators, who were immediately released when the evidence didn't support charges. They froze bank accounts. That turned out to contain legally earned money with clean paper trails. The investigation didn't collapse entirely, but it stalled, frustrating prosecutors who'd expected a major case. Salvatore, realizing he'd been compromised somehow, disappeared into witness protection with nothing to show for months of work, except testimony that couldn't prove much. We survived, Vincenzo said, watching news coverage of the failed investigation. Again, because of you. Because we're a good team, Rosa corrected. You provide the leadership and strategic vision. I provide the analytical approach and business acumen. Together, we're stronger than either of us alone. That's how partnerships work. Is that all we are? Vincenzo asked, turning to face her. Partners? They'd been carefully navigating their evolving relationship for months now, moving slowly, building trust, learning to be intimate after Rosa's trauma. It hadn't been easy. There were setbacks, moments where old fears resurfaced, Nights where she'd wake from nightmares of David and need Vincenzo's patient reassurance that she was safe. But there were also moments of surprising joy. Mornings waking up in his bed to coffee already made. Evenings where they'd abandon work to just talk, sharing stories of their pasts, dreams for their futures. Small touches that communicated affection. His hand on her back, her fingers straightening his collar, the casual intimacy of people who'd earned the right to each other's space. "No," Rosa said softly. "We're more than partners. We're family. We're friends. And we're—" She paused, finding courage. "We're falling in love. Or at least I am. With you. Despite every rational reason that should make it impossible." Vincenzo crossed the space between them, pulling her into his arms with the confidence of someone who'd learned her boundaries and how to respect them. "There's nothing rational about love, Rosa. It doesn't follow logic or reason. It just is. And what I feel for you, it's bigger than anything I've ever experienced. You've become essential to my life in ways that terrify and exhilarate me. I love you, completely, regardless of how complicated or unlikely that makes everything." "I love you too," Rosa whispered, and felt something break open in her chest. The last wall she'd maintained, the final protection against being hurt again. Loving him was a risk, was choosing vulnerability, was trusting that this time would be different. But after everything they'd survived together, after all the ways he'd proven himself, the risk felt worth taking. They stood together in Vincenzo's study, where their partnership had been forged and their relationship had grown. Outside, New Orleans continued its eternal dance. Crime and culture, beauty and danger, history and progress all mixed together in proportions that made the city unique. Inside, two people who should never have met, who came from incompatible worlds, who had every reason not to work together, held each other and contemplated a future that finally looked possible. "What happens next?" Rosa asked. "Next, we keep doing what we've been doing," Vincenzo replied, "building something sustainable, transitioning the organization toward legitimate businesses, creating a legacy that isn't just about power and fear, but about actually contributing something positive. And we do it together, because that's the only way I want to do anything anymore." "Together," Rosa agreed. "Partners in business and life." "Partners," Vincenzo echoed. "Family, and whatever else we decide to become along the way." 5 years later, the transformation was complete. The Moretti family had divested from most illegal operations, maintaining only the bare minimum necessary to keep connections with the old world while building an empire in the legitimate one. Real estate, restaurants, shipping, all operating legally, all profitable, all providing a foundation for a future that didn't require looking over their shoulders constantly. Rosa had been instrumental in every step. Her business acumen combined with Vincenzo's leadership, creating something unprecedented. A successful transition from organized crime to legal enterprise that preserved power while shedding vulnerability. She'd proven Paolo right. She was orchestrating evolution, and it was working. She and Vincenzo were married in a small ceremony, just family and close friends, nothing ostentatious. Mrs. Chen cried. Paolo gave a speech about how improbable and perfect their match was, and the whole thing felt more like a celebration of what they'd already built than a beginning. "We did it," Rosa said on their wedding night, standing on the balcony of their bedroom looking out at the garden below. "We actually survived everything and came out together." "You did it," Vincenzo corrected, joining her at the railing. "You saw possibilities I never imagined. You had courage I didn't know existed. You saved my life that first night in the rain, Rosa, but you've been saving it ever since in ways that matter more, showing me there's another way to live, another way to lead, another way to be." "You saved mine too," Rosa replied. "When you picked up a desperate woman off the street and gave her more than shelter. You gave her purpose, respect, and eventually love. You saw who I could be when I'd forgotten. That's not a small thing, Vincenzo." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching night settle over New Orleans. Somewhere in the city, their former world continued. The crime, the danger, the eternal struggle for power and survival. But they'd stepped out of that world into something different, something better, something they'd built together from impossible circumstances. The woman who'd warned a mobster about a car bomb never imagined she'd end up here. Married to him, running a legitimate business empire with him, building a future that honored the past without being imprisoned by it. The man who'd been raised to rule through fear never imagined he'd learn that strength could be gentle, that power could be shared, that love was the most dangerous and worthwhile risk he'd ever take. But life rarely goes according to plan. Sometimes it goes better. Sometimes it takes rain and desperation and a moment of courage in the dark and transforms it into something luminous. Sometimes it proves that the most unlikely connections, between a beggar woman and a mafia boss, between someone running from violence and someone committing it, between worlds that should never touch, can become the most enduring. "I love you," Rosa said, not for the first time but always meaningful. "I love you too," Vincenzo replied. "Thank you for saving my life, all the ways you've saved it." "Thank you for giving me one worth living," Rosa answered. Below them, the garden continued its growth. Above them, stars emerged from twilight. And between them, something rare existed. A partnership built on mutual respect, forged in crisis, strengthened by choice, and sustained by love that proved the cynics wrong and the optimists right. Sometimes the best stories start in the worst places. Sometimes courage speaks in the rain to danger, and danger listens. Sometimes two people from incompatible worlds find they fit together perfectly when nothing else makes sense. This was one of those times. This was one of those stories, and this was just the beginning.